So let's take a look at what's doing well for the Sons of Sanguinius, with an overview of 5 top performing lists for the faction and what the best players are putting on the table to deliver victory for the guys in black, gold and red. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Blood Angels once more. And in the wake of the Codex release and its official points cost going out, I was interested to do a new roundup of army lists to see what combos and units people have been most choosing to put on the table for the Sons of Sanguinius. It's not been too long since 40k's last balance update at time of recording, around about 3 weeks worth of tournament data. So far the Blood Angels have been doing alright really, the faction sitting on around about a 50% win rate or so generally pretty well balanced overall. They've just had the one larger event win so far, though a fair few other high placings as we'll talk about, and as suspected the vast majority of people are using their Liberator assault group, basically the reinterpretation of the Sons of Sanguinius, having made a few trade-offs since the index version, but broadly having more similarities than differences. A couple of people have had some success with other things which I'll talk about in the video, but in general if people are turning up to do well at grand tournaments with Blood Angels, it generally tends to be with that. In any case though, for this video I thought we'd talk through 5 strong army lists that people have used to place highly at tournaments, generally having just one loss at a grand tournament or better than that, to get a rough idea of what people's thinking is to do well with the army right now. The first ones I thought we'd focus on were the Liberator assault group. Not really too hard to see why this one's still remaining very strong for the Blood Angels. The core rule is red first, you get +2 strength on the charge and +1 attack on the charge, so basically if you have any space for melee units then it does better here. Getting chainswords up to strength 6 or power fists up to strength 10 are really big break points, never mind all the extra attacks. And then to make sure you're doing lots of charging, there's stratagems for advance and charge, fall back and charge, and then also the lethal hits and lance from Red Rampage, now having a bit of a trade-off that you have to take Battle Shock if you have both of those, but still means that their units can pull out some absolutely obscene damage when they need to. On top of that, they've got a couple of good enhancements, a one for once per game fight first, and that can make one of their dangerous melee units very hard to approach, plus a nice cheap one for sustained hits 3 in melee for 1 round, which can be absolutely enormous when comboed with a captain. For the first list using the Liberator assault group, this list by Anthony Vanella was used to take 3rd at a big tournament called the California Cup, with 7 victories to 1 defeat in an 87 player event, and is a bit of a mixed threat. It's got 2 enormous melee death blocks, a scary captain with intercessors in an impulsor, then some tanks and a bunch of lone operatives. For the melee threats, there's Dante leading a squad of Sanguinor Guard with Oncarmen Blades. With Dante and a whole bunch of high AP melee attacks, they'll be able to go through most elite infantry, and the +1 to advance and charge mean the squad has a pretty massive threat range as well. Then there's Lamatis leading a big squad of 10 Death Company with maximal fists, eviscerators and plasma pistols. We'll focus on him in a second, but again basically they get to the critical mass of being able to destroy the majority of things in the game in a single turn, and Lamatis makes them a fair bit tougher on the hit back. There's then a captain with Rage Fueled Warrior, the sustained hits 3 enhancement, which goes with some assault intercessors in an impulsor. I covered that one on a specific combo in the channel, but basically if that captain charges something in the midboard, use this as free strat on Red Rampage if you need it, and combine it with Oath of Moments to re-roll all the hits and try and fish for those 6s, then there's a good chance that that one captain can destroy the majority of things in the game, never mind when backed up by the intercessors. There's then Chief Librarian Mephiston, who's a staple in the majority of lists at the moment, given lone operative and just some very good stats. His damage output is solid, though maybe not outstanding for the cost, but just combine that with a fairly tanky profile, being somewhat fast and having lone operative, and he's kind of hard to go too far wrong with. There's a bunch of units for objective scoring, 1 unit of 5 jump intercessors, 1 unit of 5 infiltrators to hold the backfield and deny deep strike, 1 unit of scouts to screen the midboard, and a combi weapon lieutenant who's always very disruptive as a lone operative with his reactive moves and being somewhat hard to kill. For objectives there's also 2 Imperial Assassins as well, a Calidus Assassin for jumping on and off the board doing secondaries, and the Close Deep Strike Collector's Assassin, which can potentially threaten to mess with an enemy home objective and give you a 3-inch deep strike unit for fairly cheap, maybe good for things like behind enemy lines. Finally, just to make sure that enemy tanks can't relax, there's a pair of Vindicators here, just massive general purpose damage output, best against tanks and heavy vehicles, though blast can keep it relevant against heavy infantry as well, and they can afford to be at least fairly aggressive as well, given good defensive stat lines and the ability to fire in melee. Interesting to see them being taken over Gladiator Lancers for the role, but they certainly feel like threats the opponent's going to struggle to ignore. Overall it looks like a pretty well balanced and terrifying Blood Angels list, 3 massive melee threats you can't ignore, some big shooting that's going to put holes in vehicles, and then a pretty serious amount of lone operative and objective securing units, which feels like the list is going to be very strong on secondaries as well. For the first unit focus, let's take a look at Dante and the Sanguinary Guard. The new Sanguinary Guard seem to be a pretty solid general purpose melee threat in the new Codex. 135 points was considered quite a good cost for them. 3 wounds at toughness 4 with a 4+ invulnerable save means that they're not too far off being flying Terminators and can use Armour of Contempt rather well. They move fast and are typically armed with the Onkarmin blades for 4 attacks each at strength 6, AP 3 and damage 2. It means they'll be strength 8 on the charge, so should go through the majority of lighter vehicles or medium infantry. They might need some help from Red Rampage though to take down the toughest stuff around. They get a bit tougher in melee as well with their debuff rules. They're quite commonly led into battle by Commander Dante, 130 points to give a little bit of extra fight to the unit. He makes them hit on a 2+, and he contributes his own attacks, which are really quite big against toughness 10 things, as he'll be toughness 10 on the charge with lethal hits with that Axe Mortalis, and a big 9 attacks with that on the charge, which is rather nasty. He also gives his squad +1 to advance and charge as well, and with the advance and charge stratagem an option, that means that his squad can be moving incredibly far with a big threat range. In theory, that's something like a 25-inch threat range for the squad charging on average without any rerolls. It seems that him +6 Sanguinary Guard is a bit of a staple, a big scary melee unit that can kill most things and won't fall over without at least a fair bit of dedicated fire when the enemy attacks back. Given that this list features him as well, it's probably worth mentioning the Danger Captain that I covered in its own video. Basically a standard captain on foot with a power fist can get up to some obscene damage numbers. He uses his once per game ability to get an extra 3 attacks and devastating wounds, then uses the sustained hits once per game on the same turn, just to massively multiply that, and then he can combine it for Oath of Moment for 4 rerolls to hit, and Assault Intercessors for wound rerolls, potentially 4 wound rerolls if he's attacking something on a mid-board objective. Then his free stratagem can be plugged into Red Rampage if you need yet more carnage on top of all that. As a result, his damage numbers for just him alone are kind of obscene. You do around about 19 wounds to a Chaos Knight on a mid-board objective, and likely the Assault Intercessors with him will be enough to finish it off. And even after that, it's not like he's not a melee threat anymore. He'll still be a fighty Blood Angels unit who can threaten all the stratagems, and at the moment he feels like borderline auto-include status for a Liberator list in my opinion. Moving on though, let's take a look at some other examples. Here's a second Liberator list that went 5-1 in a 62-player Grand Tournament in Toronto, run by Francois Lalonde. This one's definitely got a bunch of similarities to that first one, but instead of having a whole bunch of lone operative and tank support, it just doubles down on yet more melee. The main similarities are that we've still got Mephiston, Dante plus a big unit of Sanguinary Guard, Lamates and his big squad of Death Company, and that Murder Captain with some Assault Intercessors in an Impulsor. Added on to that though, we've also got a second block of Death Company, another big unit of 10 of them, at this time led by Asterath with his devastating wounds on the charge, plus a second Blood Angels captain jumping out of another Impulsor, this one taking the icon of the Angel, which might have been a points filler, but can potentially trigger some desperate escape, which I guess could be a nuisance from time to time. So basically that's 3 jump pack massive melee threats that should be able to kill most things in the game, particularly with support. A Smash Captain that can one round most things on his turn, and then another Captain units that can still be fairly scary, given a bit of support. In addition to that, there's 2 Jump Intercessors with Power Fist and Plasma Pistols, and a unit of 5 Infiltrators to guard the home field, but maybe going a little bit lighter on the cheap objective grabbers this time. Overall feels like a very strong theme melee Blood Angels list, loads of Death Company and Sanguinary Guard, backed up by a bunch of more regular Angry Intercessors with chainswords. Death Company Marines with jump packs still seem to be a massive staple in their new form. They're 130 points for 5 of them, though most people take them at 240 for 10. That was how they tended to be run pre-Codex as well, just to get them at critical mass where they could destroy the majority of medium-sized units in a single turn. They get 3 Power Fists and 2 Eviscerators plus a bunch of Chainswords. Being Death Company, they get 2 reroll hits in melee, so generally have pretty scary damage output and a 6+ Feel No Pain. They get to reroll charge rolls, which gives them a little bit more reliability. They could occasionally fall prey to someone precisioning their leading chaplain, which could occasionally cause problems as it could make them OC0. Overall, it makes them a pretty fast-moving and hard-hitting unit. They're not really all that sturdy on the defense, even with that Feel No Pain. Likely to be a top priority for the enemy hitting them back when they get to strike back in return. The Death Company Chaplains are common sights leading them. Lamates is the most popular at 110 points. He gives them -1 damage, giving them some good survivability against damage 2 and damage 3 attacks, which are usually the best things to attack them with. Lethal hits, which helps them punch up against tough stuff, plus the Blood Crozius with his own strength 6, AP 2 and damage 2 attacks, which with lethal hits are quite nicely general purpose as well. Lamates still seems to be the go-to over Asterath despite his stat line glow up. He wasn't really taken much pre-Codex, though he certainly is run a fair bit more now. He gives the unit devastating wounds on the charge, the ability to fight on death on a 4+, which can make the unit harder to kill in return for certain melee heavy armies, and his personal close combat is fairly scary as well. 6 attacks at strength 7 or strength 9 on the charge, AP 3 and damage 2, all with devastating wounds and precision. The stat line's really quite nice compared with Lamarty's, even if you won't have inbuilt lethal hits on those. It certainly seems both of them can work at a competitive level, though it still seems that Lamarty's might be the go-to as a first choice for the majority. Before we move on, I'll just give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor in Crimson Lord Upgrades by Great Eye Studio, which are a fun third-party source for some themed upgrades to make some Blood Angels look a little bit more angelic. They've recently had a pretty wildly successful Kickstarter project. Having a slight lack of theming and upgrade sprues is certainly a criticism that people have had of Space Marines in the Primaris Age. It's led to a fair few third-party bit sites stepping up to try and fill the gap. And the Crimson Lords have a bunch of physical bits packs that you can order in from a company called Only Games. Links down in the video description. The core set has a whole bunch of themed head, shoulder pads, helmets and backpacks and things. They've got a Sacred pack featuring some nice wings jump packs, which have certainly been a fan request in recent times. They've got a Rage pack, which could be nice enough for Death Company perhaps. Again, kind of notable that Games Workshop don't really sell any Death Company bits of any description at the moment, and this could be one way to add some themed parts after the retiring of the Firstborn kit. And they've got a few other bits options, including characters and Dreadnought packs and things. In any case, feel free to check them out, links down in the video description below. I'll talk through the range a little bit more at the end of the video, and a big thank you to them for sponsoring this one. On with the army list though, and for our third example of a top performing Liberator list, there's this one by Jan Reisenauer, who took this rather unusual Armour Blood Angels list to take second at the Corsair Open GT, going 5-1 in a 37-player grand tournament. I must admit this one maybe does speak to me just a little bit, given that I went about collecting a unusually armoured Blood Angels list back from 5th edition when all their vehicles got the fast keyword, so I found it fun to see maybe a slightly surprising off-meta Blood Angels build doing so well like this. For the big shooty tanks, there's a whole bunch of Predators, 2 Predator Annihilators with las cannons, and 3 Predator Destructors with las cannons, plenty of anti-armour there, and the Destructors should have plenty of firepower to wipe out elite infantry, plus a single Vindicator. Then they've got a whole bunch of skirmish jump infantry squads that can be fighting for the mid-board and making sure the enemy doesn't want to press too close to those tanks. There's 3 sets of 3 Sanguinary Guard with Oncarmin Blades. With the detachment buffs and Rampage thrown in, they should have a good chance to take a massive chunk out of anything that they hit in combat. I quite like the fun small squads of minimal investment to jump in and kill some stuff and maybe not be super concerned if they do wind up dying in return. On top of that, there's 3 units of 5 jump intercessors with a power fist, 2 units of 5 Vanguard veterans who use Inferno pistols in this one, and even if they're a little bit cheaper and lower investment, the Vanguard veterans and jump intercessors can still be well capable of deleting slightly larger enemy infantry units in a single round. Then there's a unit of Incursors which can spot for the tanks and give them +1 to hit, a scout squad to hold the midfield, and also Chief Librarian Mephiston for all his lone operative and fights first goodness. Definitely a slightly unusual one, this one. 6 big armoured firstborn tanks paired with 34 jump infantry, plus a little bit of support, and going very light on the characters. Seeing as he's being included in just about every list, it'd be a bit wrong not to focus on Chief Librarian Mephiston. He's 125 points and just brings a massive amount of value for that cost. Lone operatives in 40k just tend to have a lot of use, being able to screen sections of the board with knowing that the opponent's heavy firepower literally can't touch them, and maybe being able to do secondaries or further flung primary objectives without being interrupted while doing so. Beyond that though, Mephiston is just pretty all round great. 6 wounds at toughness 5 with a 2+ save, a 4+ feel no pain and an invulnerable save, and will be a good target for Armour of Contempt as well. It just means he needs a fairly serious amount of damage to reliably be able to take him down. He's got a bit of shooting between Fury of the Ancients and Plasma Pistols, which are quite nice against enemy medium infantry. Solid enough melee with 7 attacks at strength 11 on the charge at AP 3 and damage D3. It's got lethal hits as well, and it can be a bit swingy, but that's still very adequate for the points cost I think. He can fight first, so you get that before the enemy attacks if they charge you. He can advance and charge, and potentially lock lighter enemy units in close combat, which occasionally could be really disruptive. Between all that, if played smartly, he can be a massive utility unit that every so often can just one-round medium infantry squads, and be a bit of a pain for the opponent to deal with, unless he's literally right on the front lines getting shot by everything. Next up, as mentioned, a lot of people have been trying out either Lost Brethren or the Angelic Host, at least not in competitive play, as it's generally seen that the Lost Brethren just doesn't really add too much. The Liberator can't do better, and Angelic Host definitely has its interest, but far less synergy with melee type units with its redeploys. It seems that the meme of mass deep striking and scepters over and over again hasn't materialised yet for anyone. I was interested to see that someone managed to do well with the Lost Brethren though. Kevin Hamilton used this to take 6th at Kipper's melee. 4 wins to 1 loss at a big 84 player tournament, putting a bunch of Death Company on the table. The Lost Brethren detachment does have some interesting stuff, though I'd say its core rule is pretty weak. You get to reroll wound rolls of 1 if Death Company units are below starting strength, or all wound rolls if they're below half strength, and just compared with massive extra damage on the charge, it just doesn't come up quite as much. Otherwise though, they've got a sticky objectives for Slain Death Company, a Fights on Death on a 3+ if they're near a Chaplain, a couple of interesting damage buff stratagems, and a pile-in boost. It does have quite a lot of flexible melee support that maybe feels a bit more subtle than the Liberator's massive strength that you get for a few key stratagems. In any case though, as with a few of the rest, there's a Lamarties with a big 10 strong Jump Death Company squad. Seems pretty great to use the stratagems on. Then 6 squads of 5 Death Company Marines on foot, or with Power Fist, Eviscerator, Plasma Pistol and Chainswords. They're the melee version that get these sustained hits when they get depleted squads. It looks like they're going to be trocking up the board in a Land Raider Redeemer and 2 Impulsors, some of them footsloggy I suppose. 2 of the squads have Chaplains in, and 1 has a Death Company Captain. Potentially if he gets slain, you get a +1 to hit for every Death Company model on the board for the entire next turn, which I guess is fairly auto-include if you had a slot for it for 10 points. Beyond that, there's 2 units of regular intercessors, which I guess are there for the sticky objectives, a unit of scouts that can screen the midfield, the Sanguinor as an interesting skirmishing lone operative, seems that he got the nod over Mephiston in this particular list, and then the Land Raider Redeemer is a pretty enormous and scary threat in itself, a great big Flamestorm Overwatch turret in the midboard that the enemy would have to think carefully before they advance too aggressively around it. It's interesting to see that the Impulsors have the Orbital Comms upgrade as well. That's the one with the chance to farm some command points. I've not seen many people using that over the Shield Dome or the Missile. It is kind of cool to see Mass Death Company Foot Marines working here, as in general they haven't been a unit that's been particularly well rated by people on the competitive scene. It certainly seems that for Liberator Assault Group at least, if you want some on-foot melee with a bunch of chainswords, you're probably better off going with the Assault Intercessors and their rerolls and big objective control, and pairing them with regular captains on foot. They definitely do have some advantages. They get the extra Eviscerator, the damage puff when they're depleted, inbuilt rerolls to hit, and the 6+ feel no pain, and they don't cost that many more. It maybe does feel like a bit of a downside though that you either have to shell out for a Chaplain or lose any objective control, and as a result it doesn't really seem like there's been loads of play for them at 90 points. Most armies tending to shell out for the Jump Pack Death Company if they're going for them, and pairing them with the very good unique Chaplains. The Sanguinor also seems to be alive and well too. He was getting a bunch of play before the Codex, and is still basically as good as he was. There's just far more competition for Mephiston if you want a chunky fights first lone operative on the table. He's got a faster base movement versus Mephiston, but otherwise is kind of similar in terms of his damage output with fights first. He lacks any shooting, but his special move is his Miraculous Saviour special rule, where if you're playing against a melee army, you can potentially have him just turn up to try and ruin an enemy charge. They charge you, and the Sanguinor appears in combat, hopefully slays a whole bunch of models, and saves the squad that you are about to just lose. There can be some interesting shenanigans with positioning that as well. You could place him in a position that's very hard for the enemy to hit him back properly. Finally, for the Blood Angels list, it seems that we're back to Armoured Angels once more, and interestingly, the Grand Tournament winning list for the Blood Angels has been for Ironstorm Spearhead, so this one may be having a bit more of a general Space Marine sort of flavour, with Blood Angel special stuff tacked on. The list was run by Mark Pocock, who used it to take first at Frostfire GT, with 5 wins undefeated at a smaller 29-player Grand Tournament. Ironstorm Spearhead is the Space Marine armoured one, giving you inbuilt rerolls whenever you make attacks, a few interesting damage stratagems, plus things like returning fire or auto-explodes or a few other tricks. So basically pretty great support for vehicles. In this one, for some general gun tanks, there's 3 Predator Destructors armed with las cannon sponsons, 2 Gladiator Reapers, which tend to be really quite popular in Ironstorm, potentially a good user of the sustained hits on 5s if you really need something dead with extreme prejudice. And it looks like there is a bit of use of the unique Blood Angels Baal Predators here, with Flamestorm Cannons and Heavy Flamers, nice scary fast moving gun turrets to burn down infantry in the midfield. It looks like they're supported by a Tech Marine for a +1 to hit, some healing, and Adept of the Omnisire to keep his creations safe from enemy shooting. There's a massive countercharge threat in Lamarties with a big squad of Jump Death Company. Again, I suppose that could lead to some tough decisions for an enemy that wanted to close on the tank gun line and risk getting countercharged very hard. There's the two fights first lone operatives here in Mephiston and the Sanguinor, hard to deal with and able to skirmish hard against enemy medium infantry. Interestingly, it looks like there's a lone Gravis captain here with the flesh is weak. He's basically a remarkably tanky character model between his own inbuilt damage debuff and the big feel no pain, and seems that he was tempting enough to run just individually. To guard the home field, there's a unit of 5 infiltrators with their denied deep strike, though I guess they could push out into the midboard and leave that to the tanks if it made sense to. And then interestingly, a couple of Invader ATVs at their new much cheaper points cost, quite nice cheap and expendable scouting things, and their multi-melters do work rather well with the Ironstorm rerolls. Again, definitely a bit more of an unusual Blood Angels army list, this one. Seems that tanks with big guns and scary melee stuff to back them up can potentially be a pretty nice, simple and effective combo though. Finally, for unit focuses, we've got the Baal Predator. This one went up to 135 points, so it's a bit less efficient than it was pre-Codex. It still seems though that it was good enough to warrant a place in that army list. Its Flamestorm Cannon gives you D6 plus 3 auto hits at Strength 6, AP 2 and Damage 2, and with a couple of heavy flamers that can be really quite a big Overwatch threat to mid-board objectives. Plus being able to advance and shoot it means it's got a good chance of being in range on the things that are most important for it. Nice to see that at 135 points it's not completely out of the running, though it does seem to be taken in fewer army lists than it was pre-Codex given the points bump. In any case though, interesting to see what people are using for some strong Blood Angels lists going forward at the moment. Certainly seems that Mephiston's a staple, Lamarty's with a big unit of Death Company, the big fighty captain with some assault intercessors in Liberator, and plenty of other jump pack things getting a lot of play as well. Let me know how the Codex has affected your Blood Angels and what's been making its way into your list these days. Finally, to finish up, I'll just cycle back to those Crimson Lord upgrades by Great Eye Studio. Makers of 3D printed bits compatible with Space Marines and selling physical bits packs by a UK based firm called Only Games, though they do ship worldwide with their 3D printed components. For a close up of a few of their different parts, here are a few of their heads and things. I quite like the Death Masky style ones up at the top. They've got a bunch of shoulder pads featuring things like the teardrop icon chalices and a few rather ornate winged bits. Could be nice to sprinkle in with other stuff. Plus some of their packs have some really quite interesting weapon bits. I feel like unique shields are a really cool way to add a bit of theme to a Space Marine chapter. And they've got various other things like chain blades and stylized hammers and things. I imagine these could pair rather nicely for some assault terminators. They've got lots of different sets, including this core one here, which has a bunch of the shoulder pads and heads. I quite enjoyed their Ancient upgrades, which is basically a Dreadnought compatible set of 3D printed bits, giving a bit more theme to the rather sparsely upgraded Brutalis that is now the way to represent the Death Company Dreadnought. They've got character upgrade packs that could be good for things like Sanguinary Priests or Chaplains. Definitely could be a potential money saver here if you can use some of these to kit bash a few characters and make them out of some cheaper models perhaps. Winged backpacks and jetpacks and things have certainly been a talking point in recent times, and they have some that could be compatible with upgrading some jetpack infantry to some sanguinary guard maybe, as a sacred pack for options to do that. And as mentioned before, they've also got a rage pack as well, which could make you some very angry Space Marines with some nice crosses and a whole bunch of skulls and things. In any case, feel free to check them out, links down in the video description, and a big thank you to them for sponsoring the video. Hopefully could be some useful bits to some of you out there. In any case, I'll leave that one there for now. Let me know your thoughts as to the Blood Angels army lists and any other insights as to the ones that did well. I look forward to having a read of the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.